Hey guys, welcome back to more Prorevenge Reddit stories. In this Ripe story video, have you ever had a boss steal credit for your work? Mine did even worse. She hacked my account to delete evidence that proved she was a fraud. For months, she played a game of cat and mouse, trying to get me fired to cover up her own disastrous mistakes. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, "Helped my former boss get fired." So 3 years ago, I quit a job I loved because I could not stand the women in charge. They were technically two agencies that work together, and both executive directors are horrible. It is well known among staff that they give themselves raises every year, but refuse to give other people a raise. They do very little work and yet take all the credit and will even publicly shame hardworking employees. They held an hour-long meeting after I told them that I could not possibly add any more tasks to my schedule to tell me how horrible I was, and claimed that I was not getting my work done, that I was a liar, and that I needed to put more effort into my work instead of my personal life. By the way, I just suffered my third miscarriage and was getting a lot of testing done, and I put in my notice 3 days later. Their data analyst was quickly able to prove that not only was I doing all of my work, I was actually inputting data for others. We had to input proof of everything we did. 2 weeks ago, I was having a casual conversation with my boss, who just happens to be the board president for one of the agencies. He asked me why I left and informed me that 3 years later they still have not been able to fill my position. I told him the truth and told him that I found it very odd that the board never did an audit because it seemed obvious that the directors were not doing their job and funds were not being handled properly. Well, they did one last month, and one director was unavailable because she went on a month-long trip. She could not prove that she did not misuse funds when it looked as though she did. She was released last week after 25 years. Not only did they claim that she misused funds, but they also felt she was faking her timesheets since she couldn't prove what hours she worked, and they felt that she was misusing her authority by making her employees come into the office while she supposedly worked from home. And yeah, by the way guys, if you have any bosses from hell stories to share from your own life, please feel free to post them in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. The next one is a beautiful pro-revenge story that is titled, "Boss takes credit for my work and I destroy her career." So in my first job out of university, I was hired to be IT support and to build a ticketing website for a charity of about 100 staff in England. Unfortunately, however, my first ever boss was insane. One of the main reasons I was hired was to be in charge of the whole website project and to do most of the work, but from the moment I arrived at the charity, my boss deliberately sabotaged my work to make me look bad and to make her look good. She took credit for every success and I took the blame for every failure. For months and months, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and from March, when I was hired, until roughly December, when the crap really began to kick off. The first phase, in late November, I emailed all the higher staff members in the charity to give them an update of how things were progressing with the website. 13 staff members in total. 5 of them emailed back, with everyone else copied in, asking for more information on certain points. I began replying, but my boss came and told me not to reply. I told her that would make it look like I didn't know how to reply or that I was refusing to reply, but she assured me she would reply. Over a week passed and she didn't reply, so I even drafted a template she could use because I was tearing my hair out at the stress of it all. Still, no reply. Angry complaints started arriving in my inbox from directors, and a week later in early December, on one of only 4 days I had off sick last year, she hastily arranged a meeting in which she told all the major players on the project that I had been removed from the project completely due to incompetence and never to talk to me about the project. However, she didn't tell me that I was off the project. The next day when I was back in the office, she arranged another meeting without me knowing that included loads of other people, and she reiterated the same thing, that I had been removed from the project and never to talk to me about it. I didn't even know the meeting was happening. Not knowing I had been removed from the project, I just kept working on it but wondered why I stopped getting replies from the others who were involved. Then, a week later, in a meeting with all the other major players in attendance, my boss reprimanded me constantly in front of everyone for not knowing that I'd been removed from the project. That was the first time I knew I'd been removed from the project, and it was seriously depressing. My role on the project was reduced to that of background support with no involvement in anything substantial. My boss took over the entire running of the project, and from then onwards, absolutely nothing happened for 3 months. Every job that I'd been progressing with stalled, was set back, was done completely incorrectly, and the entire project temporarily derailed. Now for the phase 2. The stupidest thing I did was start working on the project again, purely because I saw nobody else was doing anything and I hoped it might make my boss treat me fairly if I saved the damn thing. Then on February 21st, the go live to the public date had long passed when I started picking up little jobs that I knew I could quickly get done. By the end of March, of course, the project was way past its due date, but instead of it being a case of "holy crap, OP, thanks for saving this project," it had instead become possible to pin all the blame on me, because to anyone who didn't know, it might look like I'd been in charge all along. My boss started with "this should have been done months ago" routine. On April 1st, we technically had our go live to the public with a battered piece of crap website running off a messy, idiotic SQL database. There was still an absolute mountain to climb in terms of getting crap done, but since we had gone live, the third-party support team who helped me through the whole project asked my boss to sign off on the project. On April 4th, my boss allowed the company to sign off on the work so that, for the rest of the mountain of work that had again become mine, I had almost no support on a unique system that no one else understands. Most of the times I tried to work on something, from then on the third-party company would ask for payment, since boss had stupidly decided to host on this company's servers and only my boss was able to authorize payment. I chased her constantly about it until I actually approached our account manager myself 2 months later. She did nothing but was able to use the fact that a lot of jobs now assigned to me were not getting done as a means of making everyone else think that I was the reason the website sucked. From mid-March until the end of May, I worked 110% on the project with this crap going on. Everything I completed, my boss took credit for. Everything that didn't get done, my boss used to discredit me. And honestly guys, that boss literally was the devil in disguise. What a terrible person. Anyway, now on to phase 3. In mid-May, a catch-up meeting was demanded by the directors of the charity to find out why the project was doing so badly, so my boss instantly, the same day, started setting me up to take the blame with, "As you know, this job was on the list months ago. If you remember, this job requires you to fix," problem that was actually her fault, etc, etc. And by the way guys, if you enjoy these workplace-focused stories from r/Prorevenge and r/malicious compliance, please let me know in the comments, because I really only want to read the kind of stories that you enjoy. Anyway, the meeting was scheduled for May 30th and I knew what was coming. Just like dozens of other meetings before, my boss was gonna crap all over me in front of everyone, and there were 2 weeks until the meeting. My boss went on holiday, so I started to prepare my defense. I created a folder full of printed out emails that I could use as evidence against her. I anticipated every attack she would make. It really paid off in the end. On May 28th, the first day after she got back from holiday, 2 days before the meeting, she had me come alone into her office. She said the failure of the project was entirely my fault and that I had blamed others for my own mistakes, which was pure hypocrisy, that I was incompetent, that I was lazy, that I had a bad attitude, and that I should not be working in the IT sector, and that I was not intelligent enough to work in an office atmosphere. She offered mother-like consolation to me as I tried to explain as calmly as possible how she was wrong. It was truly gut-wrenching. She truly is an abomination. One might as well call her Brittany Karen. Anyway, after the meeting, I went straight to the charity's HR director in the first of many meetings that would become my formal grievance against my boss. I ended up standing my ground in that meeting, though. I did not give an inch. The next day, May 29th, my boss approached me again and tried to get me to break again, but I held firm and corrected her on every bit of BS she tried to make me believe. And she was shaking a lot. So I again went to the HR director. Bear in mind that this is a snapshot of just one project we worked on together. I would say though it encompasses at least half of the crap she put me through, and it was the reason I eventually lodged a grievance against her. Phase 4, the next day my boss took away all the jobs from me again and once again screwed me over. She also finally got in touch with the third-party support company, threatened not to pay them, and then finally all those jobs I'd lined up to be completed were done, which my boss took all the credit for. Look how quick she was able to do it after I'd spent months working on it. The day after that, I formally emailed the HR director and began the grievance process against my boss. First of all, my emails began disappearing, the ones which could be used as evidence. My boss actually changed the password to my domain account and deleted a lot of emails I could have used against her. This all helped in my grievance though, because I had most of them, the important ones, printed out and backed up. I began making weekly backups of all my emails, set it up so that every email that entered my inbox was automatically forwarded to a personal Gmail account. I made backups of all my work on our shared network because that started looking weird too. I lost a lot of weight from stress. Last year I took 4 days off sick. During June I had 8 days off sick. Despite the ongoing grievance, my boss went into overdrive. She had meetings with everyone she could convince that I was an a-hole and proceeded to utterly screw me over. Our third-party IT support almost refused to work with me because they thought that I was telling everyone that they were crap. When the tables turned on my boss after I delivered all that evidence to the HR investigators, her only option was to take a lot of time off work. On the day the judgment was delivered that my grievance was upheld on all points, my boss went home early. Phase number 5, for almost the entire month of July, my boss was off sick. On July 30th, the directors of the charity announced a full staff meeting in the charity at which they announced that my boss had resigned, but I've later discovered that she was fired. The next day, a massive unofficial staff party was announced with, I kid you not, a ding-dong, the witch is dead theme. I thought it would be wise not to attend though. I have to continue to keep all of this confidential, and my boss continues her malicious behavior though. She has now resorted to meeting individually outside of work time with those staff members who didn't hate her, mind you, there are very few who didn't hate her, and those wealthy members of the local community who are involved with the charity, essentially to fish for evidence she can use against me and the charity as a whole for firing her, but also to continue her campaign of discrediting me personally. There are gonna be a lot of relationships that will take a long time to mend. It's like being constantly pursued by an evil entity that actually goes out of its way to hurt you. It's difficult to completely relax about it all, but I've just come back from 2 amazing holidays and I've kind of gotten used to it. I still feel like there will be something waiting for me in the future, but I think her options are all out and I can finally move on with my life. The really bad thing is that everyone comes across so many of these malicious people in life. I find it really difficult to trust anyone, and it seems so difficult to continue life as normal when you might have someone who will dedicate themselves to hurting you. My old boss was the head of operations for the charity, but is now a secretary at an auctioneer's after what seems like 6 months unemployed. And the next one is titled, Won't Let Me Give You a Warning? Stinks to be you. So this happened about a week and a half ago. I was taking a walk in a small park that has a wooded area in and a few walking trails. I decided I wanted to take the shortest path as it was getting late. About halfway through the path, I saw a skunk in the middle of the path, and I'm sure based on the title, most people already know where this is going, so I turned around and decided it was not worth it to proceed further, and approximately halfway was enough. I exited the path the same way I entered, and as I was entering, I saw an old teacher of mine from high school. Let's call her Mrs. Samantha, not her real name. Mrs. Samantha was a teacher that went out of her way to nitpick everything I did in her class in high school. Note, it has almost been 12 years since I last saw her and 13 since I was in her class. Anyway, with the backstory aside, I went up to greet her and said, "Hey Mrs. Samantha, have you been?" "Hi, I'm trying to take my daily walk down the shortest path, don't bother me." "I wouldn't." "You said hello, this conversation is over until I get back from my walk, or you can walk with me and we can catch up." "I just want to warn, this conversation is over for now. Wait until I finish my walk and we can catch up, understand, OP?" At this point, I think for a moment, I'm not the type of person who would usually normally just let someone walk into a potential skunking, but she was just rude to me twice and did nitpick everything I did in high school, so I chose to say nothing and just took a seat at the bench nearby. "See, was that so hard? We don't need to be a know-it-all. That was your issue back as a student." And Mrs. Samantha went down that path. As she did, I whipped out my phone and texted my parents that I'd be heading back to my childhood home a bit late. We'll help them with the dog later, but eat dinner without me. I'll be here for a bit longer. One thing to take into account is that the entrance and exit for the shortest path we have exit parallel to each other. The entrance is on one side of the bench I sat at, and the other side was the exit, in this case entrance behind, exit in front, so family can wait on the bench and see their relatives exit. Normally, I knew I would see her on the way out if she'd complete the whole route, but in this case I had a feeling I would smell her coming out first, knowing her attitude. Sadly, my instincts were spot on. As I'm on my phone playing a few games, I heard Mrs. Samantha's voice vaguely in the background, and my thought at this time was, oh no, she ran into the skunk, here we go. And I don't joke that just as I finished my thought, I heard the sound of a woman yell, maybe a scream. I couldn't really make that out 100%, but the wind was blowing my way, so I was downwind of the path, the skunk and her, so it wasn't long before I could smell what happened. Miss Samantha did eventually come out from the path exit, and the smell she was emitting was awful. It reminded me a bit of raw horseradish getting peeled, as it was really eye-watering. She moaned. I tried to warn you about that skunk. I figured it out when I got sprayed. You knew I would react like that, didn't you? I shrugged. Well, I wagered a guess, yeah. By the way, mind taking a few steps downwind? So it's easier to talk? After that, she gave me her phone number and asked me to contact her when I planned to come back. She hoped it wouldn't be when she was still reeking in skunk odor. As I said at the beginning of this tale though, it's been a week and a half, she still has some lingering skunk smell, and I found out that up until that moment she was doing okay as well, but she also told me she got sprayed twice. When I asked her why she did not turn back after being sprayed the first time, she told me if she already got sprayed and was gonna smell like skunk anyway, she wanted to complete her walk. A fun little anecdote though is that after everything she admitted she was being petty, and when I told her I still wanted to study the foreign language she taught and took some classes in college, she told me that if I ever want to practice to let her know, and she'll do it without the pettiness this time. To be honest, I think the skunking humbled her quite a bit, and hopefully she won't be forced to deal with residual lingering odor much longer, but anyway, thanks for reading. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I would like to start by stating that I met my great aunt maybe twice, and it had been 20 years between when I last met her and when she died. She was family, but I don't need any disparaging comments about how I should have appreciated my inheritance more. This is a story about a psycho Karen, not a family issue. We lived vastly different lives, and that is okay. Anyway, the only reason I received the inheritance from her was because she lived long enough that other relatives passed away before her, and I was the nearest relative. I even took the time after her funeral to spend time where she lived and try to find if there was anyone else who was close to her that might be interested in the land. I did always think that I would make it back out there, but my career progressed and I got married and kids even came along. Living out on land in the country just did not match what me and my family needed or wanted. I did have to deal with the legal and tax side of things. I was not making money off the land, so paying property tax every year was not a fun situation, but I could do it. Early on, the property tax was not even an issue. The county that the land was in was sparse. At best you could say it had a town on it, but certainly not a city. A couple years after I got the land, the tax did start rising. When I saw this, I looked into it and found out that suburbia was finding its way to that stretch of the woods. I expected to get an offer from a housing development at some point, but they did not come, not yet at least. 11 years after I inherited the land, the property tax suddenly skyrocketed. I expected it to level out once the nearby housing developments and city expansion was complete, but it did the opposite. My property tax was over double the tax for the year before, and suddenly I was motivated to investigate this again. I did not remember hearing that Bill Gates was searching for a rural suburbia, but I don't always pay attention to the news. That is when I found out that someone whose only importance was of the self variety and whose claim to fame was marrying a wealthy man and using that money to gift herself power in an HOA. I made my flight out and drive out to my land to find that a huge section of my land that is adjacent to a nearby housing development has been cleared out and developed into a mansion. Of course, I did not even believe my own eyes at first. I don't have property lines memorized, and I assumed that it was the mansion that was adjacent to my land. However, when I investigated the rest of the land, I could not find any other reason that my property tax would have skyrocketed, and I discovered something odd. The fencing that surrounded most of my land was missing on the site adjacent to the mansion. I checked with the county clerk and was able to discover that the mansion was in fact built on my land, the one that I inherited from my great aunt. So I did the only thing that could come to my dazed mind in the moment and went to knock on the door of the mansion. 2 minutes of concerted thought would have told me that someone who had pulled this stunt would not exactly understand reason, but we act with the mental facilities most accessible to us at the moment, and honestly, I felt drugged right then. Susan answered the door. For a bit of variety's sake on this side, I will be calling her by Susan instead of defaulting to Karen, which definitely describes her though. I did not present myself as someone competent at first. I just kind of sputtered that the land was mine and I had no clue what she thought she was doing building a house on it. Fortunately, Susan had her answer prepared months, maybe years in advance, so my opening statement did not matter too much. By the way, imagine all her words with a little too emphasized of a southern drawl, especially considering that she was from Nebraska. Susan said, "Oh, you sweet city slicker, I have not done anything out of the ordinary here. You forfeited this land and I simply took the opportunity to utilize this beautiful space that you were wasting." I hardly forfeited anything if my property taxes are any indication. I replied, "I have my documentation right in here." The quick, excited nature of this reply was the first hint that made it through to my shock-addled brain that this was gonna be quite the ordeal. We did not even make it through her entry room before she started blabbing on about her HOA. She was so proud of the great length towards progress that her HOA had made since she founded it with her husband's money 4 years ago. She bragged on and on about just how grateful the community was and how they threw parties for her and got her Christmas gifts, all because of how much her contributions had provided to the community. She claimed that they supported her completely and that they had helped her work through the paperwork that allowed her access to the land and then even helped her with the construction. It's been over 25 years since I last worked a customer-facing job. I still cannot help but remember the experience of listening to an ignorant person blather on while you just smile and nod. That skill apparently never completely leaves you because I smiled and nodded after determining that it was the quickest way to have the conversation end. Someone like this has all these words they store up until the opportunity comes where they can unload all of it onto whatever poor soul cannot go anywhere. The documents she showed me looked like something a property lawyer might draft on a bar napkin before throwing up the whiskey that they've been shooting. I would have been more shocked at seeing a real notary stamp on it if I didn't recognize the name as one of her sycophants on the HOA board that she had been telling me about. She still did not truly stop talking for more than a breath until I brought out a copy of my property deed and set it on the desk. I said, "This is proof of my ownership and your documentation does not hold a candle to what this means. If an offer had been made to purchase this land that was fair, I likely would have sold it to you or at least your rich husband. However, now I will need you to get off my land and pay the property tax as well as any costs associated with demolishing this building and clearing off the land." I think she would have been happier if I had asked for her firstborn. Her face darkened and she started to go on and on about how she had welcomed me onto her property and had a civil discussion with me and showed me her documentation and even was gonna welcome me for dinner and see how she could thank me for giving me the land that she needed to build her dream home. And it felt like it went on and on and on, and even though I only gave her about a minute to get her words out while I just breathed and kept myself calm. Then I cut her off and simply said, "Mine, my land and my house since I'm paying the property tax." She swiped her arms over her desk to loudly throw the pointless decor onto the ground and grabbed the phone off the archaic-ass landline she apparently had installed and put it to her ear. Within seconds she was moaning and crying to the sheriff's office and begging for the sheriff to come on down to her house and remove a trespasser. I assume he was not a member of her HOA because she asked nicely instead of demanding he do it or be fined and have his house taken away from him. I happily left her home with its suffocatingly sunshiny decor and sat down on the edge of the porch kicking my legs as I waited for the sheriff. Susan paced the porch and I think she wanted to kick me, but I turned toward her anytime I heard her coming and she did not have the courage to look me in the eye while she did it. The sheriff arrived and I was put in handcuffs nearly immediately. I did my best to explain the situation, but her local standing and stubborn aggression had him pushing me down into his backseat in no time. When we got in the car, I got him to acknowledge me enough to say that it would likely all end a lot quicker for me if I explained my situation in a legally binding location instead of devolving into an argument on Susan's front porch. Knowing what I know now, I think I'm grateful to him, still annoyed at the handcuffs and the whole booking procedure, especially since Susan had rained down self-righteous insults on me the whole time he was reading me my rights. But I did gain something from that annoyance too. It gave me an anger to channel so that I did not delay the reaction at all. I had my lawyer come out and called into my work and my family so they knew that I was safe but would not be back home for a few extra days due to an emergency involving my land. To give you an idea of our confidence going into the case, when he was handed the documentation of Susan's ownership of the land, he burst into laughter and then said, "I'm glad you didn't show me that in front of her because I might not have been able to keep professional." We did a little bit of digging into Susan's cherished HOA board and even gathered a few extra character testimonies to tell about the abusive nature of Susan's neighborhood management, all to make our court case watertight. The town was still small and sleepy enough that I could get the case moved along and get a hearing. Not only were we able to prove that Susan's documentation was fabricated, which meant she was at best trespassing, we were also able to prove her intent, making property theft and deliberate emotional distress easy when we countersued. The court gave me everything I could have wanted. They even gave me the cost to demolish her mansion after I said I had no definitive plans to do so. Susan had her reputation within her HOA demolished, which led to her and her cronies getting destroyed as well. The judge ordered to vacate the property, which led to a great interaction when people heard her husband asking her why she had not involved him if she wanted the land. Technically, her and her rich husband were homeless for a short time because of me, as they had sold their other home and they were not allowed to buy a new home in the neighborhood. Susan was forced to move wherever her husband decided, and considering the venom in his voice when he spoke about her rural hick homes that she kept buying, I think she's gonna be forced to become a city slicker. I realized when Susan left that I actually had no strong negative emotions to the house itself, but I did not want to just pocket the money meant for its demolition, so I put it towards clearing the rest of the property. It took a couple minor inquiries to find the company who owned the housing development, and they took it off my hands for a quite nice price. I do wish I had the opportunity to have my quiet rural retreat, if only because I hoped it would make me feel closer to my great aunt. All the money from the lawsuit and property sale went towards my children's college and future, so I think that is another way to continue her legacy. And the next one is a beautiful petty revenge story that is titled "Office Microwave Thief Stopped When I Made It Inconvenient, Not Spicy." So this happened at our small office. We had a shared fridge and one microwave, and someone kept taking other people's leftovers. Not whole meals, mind you, every time, more annoying than that, like half a portion missing, or the good part gone, or the container put back like nothing happened. Everyone complained, nobody ever caught the person, and management did the usual email about labels and respecting others, but it just kept happening. I got tired of it because it was always my food that went missing, probably because I cook things that smell good. I did not want to do the classic laxative or hot sauce thing, I just wanted it to stop. So I started packing my lunch in the most inconvenient way possible. I bought a set of tiny containers like the kind for sauces, and instead of one box of food I split it into 6 or 7 little ones. Rice in one, chicken in another, sauce in 2, veggies in another, and I taped all of them together with painter's tape so it looked like a weird brick. On top I wrote very neatly, "If you open this, you have to retape it the same way." Next day, I came back at lunch and the tape was cut and the little containers were all scattered in the fridge, but nothing was taken. The day after that, the whole tape brick was still untouched and exactly as I left it. After about a week, my food stopped being targeted completely. I think the thief was not brave, just lazy, and my lunch stopped being an easy win. It was petty because it was extra work for me, but it worked without poisoning anyone or starting a big office drama. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again tomorrow.